Welcome back to the workshop, everybody, and this week we're taking a look at an essential skill for leatherworking, which is leather sewing. Now, as you can see from the bench in front of me, there are several specialised tools specifically for this process, but you don't necessarily need to rush out and buy them. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the equipment you're going to need. Firstly, you're going to need some leather that you actually want to join together. So they sit there, ready for us to go ahead and mark out our stitch marks. Now, you can just use simply a stitching awl, which is a point at one end and a handle that you can push, and a soft hammer. This is made of pigskin, rawhide, and you bang it into the leather. Or you can use a nail or a standard pointed ended piece of metal, a screw. Anything like that will do, as long as it's thick enough and hard enough to go through the leather. Now, there are some specific tools you can use. These, which are stitch prickers. Now, these are set at specific stitch distance. You can get them in all different shapes and sizes. And again, if you want to know where to get any of these tools, the links below are to an Amazon link, and I get a little bit of kickback from Amazon if you decide to use my link to go and buy your tools. You need something that is going to mean that your stitching is even. That is either these pricking irons, which are exactly the right distance apart for a 1/16 stitch, or a stitch wheel. Now, this has got little pointy marks on it. When you place it on the leather and push, the wheel rolls around and leaves you with indented marks in your leather. Now, this is great if that's exactly the stitch distance you want, but in this case it's not. So what I've got is a simple set of adjustable dividers. Now, I want to set these at 1 centimetre every stitch. So this is now set at the right distance for my piece, which is almost 2 of every one, and I go ahead and mark it all the way around. Mark that all the way around with the dividers, ensuring that your stitching is even spaced. And then take your stitch awl and go round and hammer right the way through. If it's thin leather, you won't need to do this, but as the stuff I'm using is a couple of mil thick, a bit of additional work now pays dividends moving forward. Now, as I'm joining piece 1 to piece 2, what I'm going to do is place them over each other, and then taking my awl, mark through onto the leather that I'm going to be stitching to. And then repeat, hammer all the way around. Super simple, ready to go. So next up, you need another couple of tools. You need a set of scissors to cut thread, you need thread, and you need stitching needles. Now, these come in all shapes and sizes, from huge sail stitching needles for soft leather or canvas down to tiny little pinprick needles. But all you really need is a cheap set. You can get these in this sort of style from Poundland or any other similar shop. You don't need to spend a fortune on them. In fact, there'll be a link down below to a big set of needles that have a good mix for you to go ahead and start your leatherworking journey. So you need a needle. Now, I quite like Bent Milner's needles, but for the purpose of this, we're going to do a single needle stitch with a straight needle. Threads. These are pure linen threads, and I get them from a local shop because I know that they can supply me with 100% linen. That is Le Prevost in Newcastle. They're a leather suppliers. Their online system is there, but it is a little bit dated, give them a call and tell them you want thread. It comes in all different colours, all different diameters, but this one I especially like for basic stitching. Again, there's a link down below for a similar one available on Amazon. So what we're going to want to do to sew this together is take our needle and thread it. I'm going to measure around the project, roughly. One time. Double the length of the thread, and then add a little bit because we're going through thickness. There we are. Now for a single needle stitch, all you have to do is pop it through your needle. When it's a big stitch like this, I always leave a decent tail and then half hitch the back end onto the needle. Just a standard granny knot, and then it doesn't go anywhere. And again, you don't need to get super technical on this. I just tie a couple of knots in the other end to stop it pulling through. There are more advanced methods where you can put a loop in and then you pull that back through and hide the stitching off to the side, or you leave the tail end trailing out. But as a very, very basic stitch method, that start on the inside of one, pull through, and it lodges against, and you just continue sewing all the way around, in and out. Now, I firmly believe you're not a real leather worker until you've stabbed yourself at least a dozen times with a very sharp needle. And continue all the way around until you're finished. Now, in some cases, a single running stitch is all you're ever going to want if it's not going to take any load or be used for anything, but I don't think it looks that great. But when you get to the halfway point, take your stitch awl and just go back along and carefully work all of the slack out of your stitching, because no matter how hard I try pulling, I always end up with a little bit of play left in the thread. And by the time you multiply that all the way down, you end up with quite a lot of thread left over. And if that isn't pulled tight, it goes eventually into slack, which opens up the edges. Right? And then I always like to stitch back round to complete the stitch. And as over with leather, I'm working the piece around me and turning it so I can get to where I want to go nice and easily. And as you can see, that then adds a complete stitch all the way around, stitch all the way back, flick the edge open and tie a knot inside. Very simple, very straightforward, joined leather, done. So that's all well and good, but I much prefer a 2-needle stitching method, because that way you've only got one area that gets locked off, and it's very simple. You find your first hole where you're starting your stitch, pull it through until it's even and centered. Now, if you've got a jig or a vise, you can put it in. If not, it requires a little bit of careful handling. You put one needle through, find its line on the other side, take the second needle, pinch it in a cross, pull that through, send it back, hold it, pull it all the way through, take your other needle, through, and through, pinch it in a cross, pull, and back. And then you can lock the tension every stage of the way. Needle through, I can ever pick it up, across and back, through, pull tight, and repeat all the way round. Now there are other tools such as a stitching awl, which does a different stitch altogether, a sail stitch, which locks in each one. But as this is just basic introductory videos, all we're going to do is look at this very simple method of 2-needle stitching. It's very traditional, it's very simple, it's very straightforward, and it's surprisingly fast, because that's already taken up all the slack, so you don't have the problem with the other stitching where you've got to go back and pick through it, because you actually pull the stitches together every single time so they lock. So as you near the end of the piece, it becomes easier and faster to pull your needles through because you're not dragging so much extra thread. You can almost do hand over hand all the way. Now on your last stitch, you don't want to go all the way through. You want to go to the middle and up, and the middle and up, so that your threads are running out the edge, like so. Then I'm going to get rid of the needles, take our 2 lines, make a loop by crossing it over, and pass one end through twice. Pull tight, open it right up, get a pair of snips in there, trim the end off, and there you have it, tightly joined, beautifully straight, easy stitching all the way around. And that's all you'll ever need to do if you're just wanting to put together layers of leather. Dead simple, nothing complicated, nothing specialist. Hammer, pointy thing, some needles, some thread, pair of scissors, and a set of dividers. Now I bet you haven't used those since you were in school. As always guys, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you found this video useful. If you do like it, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you really love what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon, because that's what drives this channel for me to be able to make more videos more regularly. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.